we have evidence that so many interventions actually work for low-income working women. They include, for example, things like cash transfers, uh, women's sort of own bank accounts, that is, bank accounts in which they are the owners of the bank account. And that's critical because it gives women the power to control their income once they have it. Each intervention only addresses a piece of the whole puzzle of women's economic empowerment, which has to do not only with their ability to earn an income, but as well to be able to control it, to be able to make decisions about it. So the issues relating to women's economic empowerment have to do both with that actual ability to earn income, as well as sort of more factors related to their agency. And there is no magic bullet for that. It's actually a long-term process. It's very important not only to have the intervention, but then to be able to discern what is it that makes sort of the success of this intervention different for women and men. And many of the factors sort of have to do with women's multiple responsibilities, not just, their responsibility for earning an income and supporting the household, but as well their unpaid work in the home, which so much affects their ability to earn income. So for example, there would be specifically these proximate causes would be things like childcare, that affects whether or not a woman can go out and work, or go out and get an education, or go out and get training, or whatever the case may be. And it affects things like transport. Do they have access to safe transport? That raises the issue, for example, of the norms and the restrictions that affect women. And while some of them may be directly, we may be able to directly address them, there are, through laws, for example, laws against, say, sexual harassment on the work site. There may be other norms that are more difficult to address directly, but nevertheless have to be considered when we're thinking about the proximate causes that enable women then to participate in the economy and to be economically empowered. In the first instance, it's been super critical in terms of enhancing women's visibility, or shall we say, our ability to see what was there. And data has also been critically important for establishing the credibility of the field. For someone like me, who has been in the field for many years, for several decades, seeing it move from having no visibility to then having credibility has been both a difficult and an exciting journey. And I think that, that we are at a good place right now, not the best, not perfect, but we're on the way, much more than I would have thought at the start of this journey. The other critical feature that I think we have to think about in research and data is the importance of sex disaggregated data. It's actually very commonly talked about in the development field. However, its application is still is not as much as it should be. Its focus has been very limited. It's been focused on women as mothers, their maternal health, and the health of their children. It is not focused as much on the gender differences in other health issues, in women's nutrition and women's health, say women's sort of propensity to heart attacks, all of which contribute to women's ability to work. So the point simply that I'm making is that sex disaggregated data is very critical. One of the things to think about here is that, in fact, in the review, I pointed out that there are very few quantitative studies of the success of collective action. And one of the reasons is that it's very difficult. It's very difficult to measure certain aspects of collective action. And by that, I mean things like sort of the support women give each other, which is very empowering for women. And certainly, and how do you measure that? Similarly, that women get in these collective action, they get a chance to, well, collectively express themselves, which gives them strength. So these are things that are difficult to measure. There are other aspects of collective action that are not so difficult to measure, and they can be measured quantitatively. And I would advocate that they should be. That is the direct economic impact. Like women gain a lot from supporting each other. And they reflect that by participating in these organizations, which are at quite large scale, numbering in, for example, in SEVA, in the millions actually, across the country. The extent to which sort of the whole issue of women's economic empowerment has now become an intrinsic part of the development discourse. And I'm talking specifically about women's economic empowerment at this point in time in the development field. There is sort of widespread recognition through most, development institutions that this is a critical issue, that looking at gender issues, looking at women, looking at particularly women's economic empowerment is critical. So